Very good. Good evening, everyone. Hey, how about that? No gavel this evening. Don't know where it is.
Gotta use my pencil.
Gardner City Council is called to order. Would invite everybody in attendance to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming this evening. We have no presentations this evening, so we're going to move directly to public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. Comments are to be kept to 5 minutes or shorter. Caution against any personal attacks or use of profanity. That being said, the podium is open for public comments. No one coming forward, we'll move. What? Got a hand up out of the corner of my eye.
What is the biggest challenge you are facing in our community?
Smooth transition of power. Managing growth, I think. Anybody else? I should make you come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, but I'll let you stay there. You put your hand up, that'll do. No one else coming forward, we will move on. Next item is the consent agenda. Consent agenda item was number 3 has been removed. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Shoot, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The consent agenda passes. Next item on the agenda is committee recommendations number 1. Consider adopting an ordinance approving a rezoning from R1 single-family residential to RP3 land garden apartment district and an associated preliminary development plan for the development of garden apartments for Bethel Estates phases 4 and 5 located north of 301 East Madison Street. Larry, good evening.
Good evening, Mary, Council. What we have before you tonight is the request at this point in time for approval of a rezoning from R1 single-family residential to RP3, which is a planned garden apartment district, case number Z-17-01, and an associated preliminary development plan for the development of the garden apartments for Bethel Estates phases 4 and 5, which would be case PDP-17-02, located roughly north of 301st Street, East Madison Street, and the existing Bethel Estates property. So the Planning Commission reviewed this on October 24th, 2017, and the preliminary development plan dated October 11th, 2017, and moved that the item be approved and moved to the governing body. However, there were some recommendations and some items I would like to briefly go over with you on the staff recommendation. The background of the description of the item, the city back in September 13th of 1978 actually annexed this property originally into the city. And at that point in time, a preliminary plat, PPO 409, was approved. And on February 14th of 2005 for Bethel Estates for both the north and south sides of Madison Street. The south side consists of a combination of garden apartments and single-family residential, which has been built out for some time and has been successfully run. The north side of Madison Street, which is about 7 acres, was originally proposed to be single-family residential for 27 lots. However, no plans were presented at that time or since that time till today. We know what the housing market did approximately in 07 and 08, and that we've been recovering from that time. However, because of the growth in the housing and diversity of needs market, Bethel Estates now wants to change this to an RP3 from an R1 for the continuation of the same type of housing that exists currently on the south side of the street. During the planning and zoning review, there were several items come forward from the public that I'd like to quickly address for you, and they're in the notes of the Planning Commission meeting, but I'd like to just briefly discuss them. Some of the applicants, start over again. Some of the public comments for the applicant have to do with the use of the property. There was some concern that the RP3 allowed for different uses over and above what was planned as an RP3. And so the discussion was, can something else be built? And the answer is yes, of course it can, because there's an RP3 district which allows for certain things to be constructed. However, because it's a P3, it is a planned district use, and once these plans are approved, any changes have to come back to the Planning Commission and thus back to you for any other type of activity. So we're pretty well locked into the kinds of construction and the kinds of things that they talk about in the Planning Commission minutes for you. So that was covered in the meeting minutes. Also, there was a little bit of a concern from the Lanesfield Road subdivision as to whether or not Lanesfield Road would be put through. It's not. It will continue just as it is. It will not be connected into the new construction area. Oak Street, however, has always been planned to go through and is the service road for entrance and access to this. So it does continue over to Madison, and the Fire Department and Public Works have both approved this as a review at this time. The other problem that we had to do mainly with construction types things, debris, blowing trash during the time of construction, etc. Those are items that we deal with every day in construction throughout the city. We do our best to handle it. The developers do their best to handle it, but you get a 30-mile-an-hour wind day like today and you're going to have some stuff blowing around. But they're usually very good about going and picking that up, and Carrie looks after them very closely, our codes compliant officer, to make sure if we have any issues they're addressed. So I really don't expect that to be an issue in the future. The final item would be the drainage for that area. There is a proposed drainage district which is required at the the east end of that property, which will drain downhill to the Lanesfield area. So there will be some construction of the storm drainage through that area that will be part of the project. But again, this will be detained on site, and it'll be a catch and release type basin area. So it should not impact the area in any way, shape, or form. So those were the main concerns that were brought to the public. The Planning Commission addressed all of those, felt like the project was a good project, and did approve the zoning to be sent to you for consideration at this point in time. I do have one item I want to give to you and brought to your attention. I handed out and gave a copy to the press already. On page 6 of this item that I gave you, the two items that were addressed were to be 2 additional sidewalks on page 6. If you will look at building 9 and 1. Building 1 actually is constructed during this first phase, phase 4. Building 9 will be constructed in the next phase, but it was to add additional access onto Madison Street sidewalk. The yellow triangles, they were originally below the 10% requirement for open space for the construction of the area, and they have added additional open space, and that's what the yellow triangles are to show you, is they now meet that 10% requirement. So they wanted to bring to your attention that they were making these changes already so that you would be aware that they were complying with the Planning Commission's request. So that would be all I have at this time.
So, committee recommendation number 1, we will entertain public comments regarding this item. Anybody would like to make public comments?
The applicant is here if you wish to talk.
Okay, no one coming forward? Questions for Larry, staff, or the applicant? Hearing none, we've got an ordinance number 2560. I would entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion Shute, second Melton. We adopt ordinance number 2560 approving and rezoning case 17-Z-17-01 from R1 single family residential to RP3 Planned Garden Apartment District and associated preliminary development plan, PDP 1701, for Bethel Estates, Phase 4 and 5. City Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Councilman Melton.
Yes.
Councilman Winters.
Yes.
Councilman Shute.
Yes.
Councilwoman Harrison.
Yes.
Councilman Moore.
Yes.
2560 passes. Committee recommendation number 2, consider accepting the dedication of right-of-way and easements for Bethel Estates of Gardner number 4 subdivision, FP 1705. Larry.
Again, this is the next step in the process since we now have an approved preliminary plat and site development plan. The easements now need to be accepted for the dedicated right-of-way and easements for this plan. The only motion needed this time would be the acceptance of that unless you have additional questions. The plans are not changed from the final plat other than those 2 items we previously mentioned on the sidewalk and the extra space.
Sorry. Public comments regarding committee recommendation number 2. No one coming forward. Questions for Larry or anyone regarding committee recommendation number 2?
I have one question, Larry.
Yes,
and that
sir.
had to do with the with access, pedestrian access, between phases 1, 2, and 3, and phases 4 and 5, which means crossing Madison. Has there been any thought as to traffic controls that might be needed in order to be able to get people from here to there, and vice versa?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was a concern that I know that some residents had expressed.
Yes, sir. It's the traffic itself within Phase 4 and 5, which would be the new area, and then the additional new access that Oak Street supplies from the neighborhood to the north has been looked at, and it's been found that they don't expect to have enough additional traffic because the number of entrances and exits from the senior citizens part of the area was not enough to require anything more than the normal stop sign at the public right-of-way.
Yeah, but from the standpoint of pedestrian access, what's the situation there? Is there a crosswalk?
Yes, sir, there is.
Is there some lighted signage there, something
No.
similar to what we have over at Brittany Court? Because my thinking is that that's a very heavily traveled road, especially at certain times of the day or certain times of the year.
Right.
And that's something that would be a real concern to a lot of folks that, although they are in an independent living facility, some of them are mobility challenged.
Yeah.
So we probably want to take that into consideration.
Not any lighted walks, no, sir, because that would be something that Public Works would look at. However, there was a safety island constructed. If you look again on page 6, you will see the safety island that was built as part of the crossover for that particular purpose, and it was built in that area because that had the greatest visibility going east or west on Madison rather than at Oak Street or down further down on North Oak Street next to what would be the community center.
Yep.
It was felt that the public safety aspect was best where the visibility was the longest, which was the middle of the block. So that will be constructed as part of the project. However, lights were not considered at this time because we have an unknown factor of the usability of that.
We don't know what the traffic's going to be.
Correct. It can always be added later.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Entertain a motion on committee recommendation number 2.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Winters, second Harrison, that we accept the dedication of right-of-way and easements on the final plat for Bethel Estates number 4. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Committee recommendation number 2 passes. New business item number 1. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing the issuance and delivery of $3.505 million principal amount of general obligation refunding and improvement bonds, Series 2017A of the City of Gardner, Kansas, and providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on the bonds as they become due. And you start to rattle all that off and all the Boy Scouts leave. But it's part and parcel. So, Laura, good evening.
Good evening. Well, as you noticed, the very first thing you read with the revised ordinance is that the principal amount is less than what it was originally. And really quickly, before I introduce Municipal Advisor Kimmel, I will say as a reminder to the public and anybody listening that this debt sale was to take care of phase 2 of our pavement management program, and also for refinancing existing bonds for interest cost savings. So I'm going to step aside briefly. One little fun fact is that since 2014, when we began working with Mr. Kimmel, we did indeed just surpass our $1 million in interest cost savings mark. So there wasn't time to get cake, but I will stand aside. He is here to walk you through this. Bond counsel Ellsworth is here in case you have questions. And then before you approve the ordinance, I would like to come back and point out a few things.
Certainly.
So with that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. It's great to be back here with good news for the city of Gardner. Do all of you have the sale day report? Okay, great. I won't go through it in exhaustive detail since we already drove off the Boy Scouts. But let me start with page 2. This is just a quick snapshot of the results. I'll go into a little more detail on some of the key points. The first thing I wanted to note, because we'll be circling back to the rating, is that we received 9 bids on the city's behalf this morning at 11. And as we'll discuss, they really came from underwriting firms from all over the country. So what is this about? Well, right now, there is still a great imbalance of supply and demand. There's much more demand for muni bonds than there is supply, and especially Kansas bonds. So even with the uncertainty with tax reform, what's that going to mean for corporate tax rates, what's that's going to mean for individual rates, there are investors that are very eager to buy municipal bonds at low rates, especially those issued by Kansas entities, and especially those for highly rated issuers like the city of Gardner. Once again, S&P looked at your very strong financial management practices year after year, and I'll go into this in more detail, but that, along with the fundamental dynamic of just demand chasing supply, yielded a really good result for the city today. So much so that the winning bid was at a true interest cost of 1.89%, as you can see, and the last place bid, which almost seems unfair to say, was at 2.04%, so 15 basis points difference between the first and last place competitive bids for the city's bonds. Another thing I want to point out in the table, you may recall that when we were here last month, we were estimating about $78,000 of net future value savings, so cash flow savings over the next several years for the city. And we felt that that was ample enough to warrant going forward with refunding, but you'll recall part of the reason for the refunding was to just bump up the size of the overall issue to get more attractive attention from the market and thereby help the phase 2 street improvement portion, right? And that worked out very well. Not only did we get great bids on your behalf, but we did even better on the refunding to the tune of about $20,000 more in net savings for the city. Laura mentioned, Finance Director Gorley mentioned the reduction in par amount. That's key to remember that with the premium bid that was received from Commerce Bank as the winning bidder, we were able to reduce the bond amount by $220,000, and you'll see that in a moment. I should also mention, as Mr. Ellsworth pointed out, you're both passing an ordinance and adopting a resolution. Those will be the actions before you tonight. So let's go briefly to the next 3 pages, which is what we call the bid tabulation. And this ranks the 9 bids in order. The Commerce Bank bid, we included the reoffering yields for their bid as the winning bid. And this really starkly shows the difference between the coupon rate, that's the rate that the investor ostensibly gets, and what is the true yield to that investor, what is the true cost to the city of Gardner. So you can see whereas most of the rates on their face are at 3%, the corresponding yields are from 1.2 to 1.84%, and that's what yields that much lower overall rate of 1.89%. Then I would point out that you received bids from First Bankers Bank in St. Louis, Northland Securities in Minneapolis, SunTrust in Nashville, Baird out of Milwaukee, Raymond James out of Memphis, Morgan Stanley out of New York. I got a lot of calls from Morgan Stanley. They were very eager to know more about the city of Gardner. They didn't quite measure up, but still, it was interesting to see a big boy play ball on this. Bernardi out of Chicago and UMB out of Kansas City. So again, 15 basis points from first to last. Then why don't I just take a moment to touch on a few points on the final debt schedules themselves, starting on page 6. I just wanted to point out that, again, as Finance Director Gorley mentioned, you funded $1.37 million of Phase 2 street improvement costs with this bond issue, new money that will be paid back over 10 years. The interest cost on this portion is less than $200,000 for a 10-year payback, and that's assuming you go the full 10 years and you don't prepay on that. So really, really inexpensive cost of capital. And then you can see that on page 8. And then on page 10, if I can have you jump ahead a few pages. This is the fun part. This is the bonus savings. And you can see on the right-hand column of this debt service comparison that when we compare apples to apples with the existing debt service on the 2009 bonds to this new debt service, you can see how the city is saving net about $98,000. So $20,000 a year, I'm sure that will be helpful to the city when you think about your new capital priorities. With that, let me just touch briefly on the rating report, which makes up the rest of this report for you. You can see it really starts on page 12. Once again, I just have to really compliment the work that city staff does in preparing for this, both Finance Director Gorley and Fiscal Services Manager Tornadin. They put a lot of time and effort into answering the questions in advance so that when we actually have the rating call, there's actually not a whole lot to say. I had to throw some questions out there and some other topics just to even get us to a half an hour because Ms. Gorley and Ms. Tornadin answered their questions so exhaustively and so decisively. So really, it went very smoothly, very well. I would point out that, as you may recall, S&P post-financial crash decided that they had to use specific descriptors of adequate, strong, weak, very strong. So I would ask you not to get too hung up on these descriptors because they're forced to use these very broad, generic terms. But the things that really matter over the long term when they judge year to year are the strong management that the city has with good financial policies and practices. The weak budgetary performance really just pertains to your purposeful use of some fund balance in the last year's budget as well as this year's budget. They have to call it weak because you had a deficit, but you intended to have a deficit, okay? So again, it's all about context and purpose. They understand what the city was doing there in driving to a slightly lower amount of fund balance. But what really is key is the very strong budgetary flexibility and very strong liquidity. And I would point out that even though your debt profile is considered, quote, weak, last year was considered very weak. So, hey, it's an improvement. And that's because, as you know from your planning, you're paying off debt. You're amortizing debt that was accrued in the early 2000s and really clearing the decks for whatever new capital projects you might have ahead of you. So again, kudos on this. It really speaks to the work that both you as the council do and your staff does in keeping the city on a stable basis. So with that, Mr. Mayor and Council, I hope that was helpful, and I would be happy to answer any questions about the bond sale, the results, specifically what that means for debt service or the credit rating report. And if not, I will stand aside for questions later.
Anybody have questions or comments? Before we turn it open it for public comments, and Bruce is, we're still going to open it for public comments. But if you've got,
my question is, how do these guys make any money getting this money this cheap?
Yeah.
But I know that's not your.
Yeah, no, that's
I know. I'm just saying that's just really cheap. So.
Right. You know, there's a lot of investors that have to put their money in fixed income. They're not going to do equities. You know that the bank isn't paying very much. So you're right. It's not all that attractive, especially when you think out 10, 15 years. You know, when you look at your Justice Center financing next year, the rates aren't going to be much higher than this, even going out longer. Even with the Fed raising Fed funds rate, as we expect them to do more in 2018, that's not a direct correlation to the muni market. So we'll, for the sake of the city of Gardner, we'll just keep it rolling. So I'll stand aside.
Yeah.
all right. Public comments regarding the new business item? Not anticipating any. No one's coming forward. Anybody have additional questions for Bruce?
Just a comment. I mean, it's nice when Bruce comes here, because I know that whenever Bruce is here, it's going to be like Santa Claus coming to town. I mean, you know, and amazing work on the bid process, and I mean, every time that we put up a number, we tend to beat it. So I'm expecting more of that. Just keep it coming.
Someday I'm going to have to come with hat in hand and say, we didn't quite meet the estimates, but I'll take credit for as long as I can. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Bruce.
Laura?
So for the sake of those listening or watching on video, I do want to go just a little further into what it is you're going to be approving about this ordinance, and I'll try to make it really, really short. As Bruce said, this was an advance refunding and you got interest cost savings. We already talked about how it was for phase 2 of the streets and refinancing. So under Kansas law, general obligation bonds are required to be authorized by an ordinance. And, and includes the covenant by the city to take care of all the federal tax requirements, the disclosure requirements. You know, you hear me talk all the time about compliance, disclosure, and this is why. So with that, unless you have any questions of Bond Counsel Ellsworth, this is step 1, the resolution's step 2, and I don't have anything else to say about it either.
It appears that we're ready to move on and take action, but thank you, Laura. That's, you and your staff do a fantastic job supporting Bruce and Ellers and them supporting you.
Right, we're a team.
Yeah,
We're a team.
no, obviously. It's very obvious.
So someday we'll come hand in hand as a team,
Yeah.
but
And say, oh, no, it's 2.1% instead of 1.89.
Right.
So, very good. Well, thank you, Laura. I'd entertain a motion on ordinance number 2561.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Shute, second Melton, that we adopt ordinance number 2561, authorizing the issuance and delivery of $3,505,000 worth of principal amount of general obligation refunding and improvement bond, series 2017A, of the city of Gardner, Kansas, and providing for the levy and collection of the annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on the bonds as they become due. City Clerk, can you call roll, please?
Councilman Winters,
Yes.
Councilman Shute,
Yes.
Councilwoman Harrison,
Yes.
Councilman Moore,
Yes.
Councilman Melton,
Yes.
Ordinance 2561 passes. Next is to consider adopting a resolution. And Laura?
this is just as it says in the title of the resolution. You need to change that number to 3505, and it is exactly as it says. The resolution talks about all the details and how the bonds work and limitations and rights of the owners, blah, blah. It's a lot of legal blah, blah, blah. You'd have to, Tyler can fill you all in. It'd take hours.
Sure.
So,
And those people at home getting to hear the legal blah, blah, blah.
right?
Well, that's
It's all in the
yeah.
resolution. It's a lot.
It's all in the resolution. and
Right.
There's a reason that I cut short my description on the front.
Right.
It's
No secrets. It's all in there.
considering the ordinance is passed, this is
Just a step 2.
just the second step. So, public comments. Anyone? No one coming forward. Any additional questions, comments for Laura et al.? Very good, Laura. Entertain a motion on resolution number 1978.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Moore, second Melton, that we adopt resolution number 1978, prescribing the form and details of and authorizing the delivery of $3,505,000 worth of principal amount of general obligation refunding and improvement bond, series 2017A, of the city of Gardner, Kansas, previously authorized by an ordinance of the city. City Clerk, can you call roll, please?
Councilman Shute,
Yes.
Councilwoman Harrison,
Yes.
Councilman Moore,
Yes.
Councilman Melton,
Yes.
Councilman Winters,
Yes.
Resolution 1978 passes. New business item number 3, consider approving the City of Gardner strategic plan.
So good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. Strategic planning. Why do strategic planning? The power of planning strategically is that it allows us to align our plans with performance and develop a very tactical way to achieve the long-range goals of the city. So our viewing public, along with some of you, may be wondering, why another plan? We have some plans that we've done over the last couple of years. Here's why. Because good strategic planning leads to accountability and high performance. So it starts by setting goals that lead, which is the plan, deciding what's important, which is the strategy, setting goals that lead, developing the plan, aligning the systems, working that plan, innovating purposely, and we heard about innovation at our retreat, as well as then step back and learning. So strategic planning allows us to take the 5-year vision that we've worked on to economic transformation that is currently underway. So priority-based budgeting, much like strategic planning, starts with stakeholder input or establishing what's important. Long-range goals or setting those goals that will lead the plan. Aligning resources to support the governing body's funding decisions. Carrying out those goals by providing direction to staff, adopting the budget, which is your ultimate funding decision, and then monitoring those results and constantly adjusting as needed. And strategic planning is much like that. So to the plan we've worked on for tonight, back in February, the governing body conducted a retreat. You'll recall Hal Johnson came, and we had an opportunity for you all to select your top goals. On April 28th, the staff leadership met and developed strategies to align with the goals that you've established. On May 25th, we convened the advisory boards and committees, and they provided guidance and feedback along with public that was in attendance at that retreat. On September 18th, you adopted the capital improvement element, which identified key infrastructure and planned for 20 years of future growth and development. And then just recently, on the 13th of this month, the governing body reviewed the plan and established the 2018 priority setting. And so we've finalized the plan, and we'll provide copies of that for you at this time. Now, at the retreat, we had a well-informed governing body who were great assistants in reviewing the visionary and implementation tools that we've developed. And it was quite enlightening to see how we were able to write rules, rewrite rules, and adjust. So just by way of quick review, visionary plans and implementation tools are the two categories of work that we've done over the past 5 years. We have our comprehensive plan, which is implemented by the Land Development Code, the growth management strategy, implemented through our capital improvement element, the economic development strategy, which we've had an opportunity to implement with our economic development incentive policy, and the Main Street Corridor Plan supports the growth management strategy, and our funding capacity analysis supports all of those efforts. So the plan represents citizen input from surveys, your strategic goals and priorities, the suggestions from our advisory groups, as well as objectives from those visionary documents and implementation tools that we've developed. So you can tell we spent countless hours, both members of the governing body, members of the community, and staff. And we certainly want to make sure that that work is well regarded. So to that end, we want to make sure that we measure that work. What gets measured gets done. So we have a new initiative that we'd like to talk about, and it's based on the logo that council members Moore and Melton helped develop with the power G. And that is G3 for Gardner Guarantees Greatness. So Gardner Guarantees Greatness is about metrics. It is about measuring what we do. It is about accountability. It is about ensuring that we have an opportunity to be transparent with our citizens, the business community, and economic development site selectors that are looking at the city of Gardner. So I want to just quickly go through the performance dashboard software that will be used to support G3 or Gardner Guarantees Greatness. And can you click on that link for me, please? So Envisio works with many local governments on performance dashboard reporting. You can see this is what it would look like when it comes up with our G3, Gardner Guarantees Greatness. This will be on our website, so their citizens can look at this, businesses can look at it, as well as site selectors. Let's go through a few more. It'll have some information about the strategic plan and background. And then if you could go down to, okay, so the goals that the city's 4 goals of promoting economic development, improve quality of life, increase assets and infrastructure management, and fiscal stewardship would be available as well, along with status of how we're doing in those 4 areas. Let's go drill down a little bit more to one of the goals, please. So when you get to the actual goals, under fiscal stewardship, when Hal was in town, the governing body determined that they wanted to promote fiscal sustainability. There are measures that are used to ensure that we're on track that come from our citizen surveys, as well as the department heads, the leadership team met to look at the various measures that they felt like were appropriate to ensure that we monitor success. Okay. And you can see as we're going through that, we have what our target is, the actual, and the average. Now, I want to just caution you that we've just started to populate some of the information we have. We have not completed all this, so this is basically a sample that's not ready to go live yet as we're continuing to input the data for the strategic plan. And then we go to the various objectives, and they'll be able to easily look at the status for the objectives that we have. Okay. Click on. It'll give them an easy way to look at the various strategies that the department heads will work on, and on status they can see the percentage, as you notice the percentages as our clerk was clicking on those. And so we can determine whether we are on track or need to make some adjustments. So also in 2018, we will conduct the community survey by ETC that the cities conducted previously, which will allow us to continue to be able to monitor the categories of metrics and performance measures based on previous surveys. One of the questions that came up at the retreat was the cost of the software, and I talked about it being $10,000 to $15,000. So I had a chance to go back and look at the number, and it's right at $15,000. It's $5,000 for the initial setup, and then the $9,000 for us to be able to access the benchmark communities. The benchmark communities are in this area: Olathe, Kansas City, Missouri, that is also using Envisio. Wyandotte County utilized it for another process. They are currently working on their strategic plan, and I had an opportunity to talk with them last week at the statewide city managers conference, and they are very pleased with it and are getting ready to implement it as part of their strategic planning effort. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Cheryl. New business item number 3, public comments regarding new business item. No one coming forward. Questions for Cheryl regarding new business item number 3 of the strategic plan, Gardner guarantees greatness.
I like this is the last piece of the puzzle to me. When we go back to the budgeting process, for example, the last part of monitoring and measuring, and that's one of the things we haven't done. So this closes the feedback loop, which is good. I think that we had talked about granularity of certain measurements and how deep we want to go on the granularity aspect. I think if we go too deep, it gets very hard to manage. So we're going to have to kind of walk the fine line there. But I've always come from the school of if you can measure it, you can manage it, and control it. So I think this is a really good step in the right direction.
Thank you.
We're missing. So.
Thank you.
Questions, comments, anyone? Well, having additional questions or comments, I would.
Oh, we did that. Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
And I would entertain a motion to approve the strategic plan.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, shoot, second winner, that we approve the City of Gardner strategic plan. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? Nicely done, Cheryl, staff, elected officials, board, committee, commission members, everyone that had a hand.
Another
Appreciate
amazing
your hard
piece
work.
of documentation here to add to the pile for submission to our communications award. Heard that, Tanika?
All right, new business item number 4. Consider adopting a resolution revising the City of Gardner Personnel Policy Manual, 2010 edition.
Okay.
Yeah, can I have a point of order here? Are we, I had gotten some feedback from one member in particular of the city council asking about whether or not we could possibly defer action on this particular item for a period of time. One, so that we can better review it internally because of the fact it was added to the agenda this past Thursday, and 2, because I wanted to address concerns that senior staff might have had on this. So I wanted to discuss with you and with the mayor and with Cheryl on incorporating some of those concerns. So if that's all right with the body, would it be possible to have a motion to withdraw this item from the agenda? Okay, I make a motion to withdraw this item from the agenda pending further study.
Motion, shoot, second, Moore, that we remove new business item number 4 from the agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? New business item number 4 is withdrawn. That is it for new business items. We have council updates, and we will have a short executive session. But we'll begin with council updates. Does council have anything for staff. We'll start with the council president.
Nothing on the docket except just again, kudos to the financial team for the work that they did on the bond issue. Excellent work, as always. We keep raising the bar, and you guys keep going over it. So it's like a pole vaulter, you know. Sooner or later, it'll get too high, but but good work, excellent work. That's all I have.
Okay. Todd.
Real quick, this is probably for Michael on the entrance sign. Are we still? I noticed those, at least I think it was yesterday. The bricks are still kind of fading off to the side. Are we still looking to maybe do a more permanent solution, like stake them down or?
Yeah, and I've got our street maintenance supervisor looking into that, and they go out multiple times a year and restack them. And so it's just a matter of, you know, what can we do permanent-wise to take care of.
Todd, anything else? Chrissy?
I don't have anything.
Lee?
I just have one question. The street maintenance on Center and Grand, between Grand and, is it Kane? Awesome job. It looks great.
Oh, yeah.
The sidewalk there is fantastic. And the only question I had was, I remember from maybe an early streets and sidewalks meeting earlier in the year that we had talked about doing the full length of Madison. Is that on, or not full length of Center, Gardner Road, from Kane all the way to the, is that on the schedule for next year?
Actually, it was on the schedule for this year, and it's part of our contract to do Center clear out to 191st Street. But due to the weather, the contractors asked us to delay that until next year, and so we'll be doing an actual change order that's no cost to the city to change when the schedule of that is.
That's it. Thanks.
Councilman Melton.
I had a few people reach out to me about, they were applicants for the planning commission seats that were open, and I found out tonight when I got here that the interviews for the planning commission had happened. So I just wondered when we agreed, or when everybody, because typically what happens is when there's a commission or some appointment process, as a body, we are asked who wants to participate, and I didn't remember that happening.
No, that didn't happen this time, as it turns out, and this is actually my fault, but I was mistaken as far as how the timeline was supposed to work, and thought that we were going to be able to hold interviews sooner, actually probably before the last council meeting that we even had. And because of that, I reached out to a couple of council members. Now, there's nothing in the rules of procedure that's dictate how it is that we pick people to be on the interview team. How Mayor-elect Shute chooses to pick people. Normally, we've brought it before the council. We didn't this time, but in the future, it's going to be up to the mayor-elect.
I understand, but I'm just gonna tell you how it looks from my perspective. That none of us were, I wasn't contacted. Was anybody who was not a part of that contacted to even find out anything? And then to find out that tonight, when I show up here, that the interviews are happening. I just don't appreciate that, and I think it's really wrong that two of the people who sat in on those are not going to be here in after the January. So you've got members who are not going to be on there picking people for commissions later on. I just I don't think that's the right way to go about it, especially when no one else was notified or asked if they would like to participate. So,
duly noted.
And I guess these folks will be coming forward, your recommendations will be coming forward at the next meeting then?
As long as we're able to conduct the interviews. This evening, we were only able to do 2. And we've got quite a few more.
Right. I would recommend that we look at asking right now if anybody else would like to be a part of those interviews. I mean, because I don't think it's,
Well, here's the problem with that is that we've already started the interviews.
Right.
We've already interviewed people, and if we interject somebody else in, then we've got to go back and interview people we've already interviewed. You know, at this point, the die is cast. And procedurally, we're on solid ground.
I understand that we are procedurally on solid ground. It just looks really bad. Especially as
That's one person's
Are you
opinion
interrupting
and
me,
maybe
sir?
more.
I'm sorry, are you interrupting me? I'm sorry.
Oh, well,
I was
if
just,
you're having fun, sure, go ahead.
I was just going to say that as one of the last things that you're doing as mayor would not, I don't think it benefits you as, you know.
Duly noted. Anything else, Councilman?
That'd be it.
Okay. All right. The only thing that I've got, I was able to attend today a Fire Services Task Force meeting over at the Johnson County offices. Members of the County Commission, EMS, County Administration, each of the outlying fire districts were all represented by fire chiefs and board members. And one of the things that they went over was standards of coverage. And I know we've got somebody from the fire district in the back, and I received this today, and I know that the rest of the council is going to receive one of these. And well done to the fire district for you know, the performance based against national averages, based against the other fire districts in the area, is exemplary and to be lauded and applauded. Please pass it along to the people back at the district offices. All right. That's all I have. We will turn this around and see what staff has for council. Gons, anything? No, sir. Larry?
One item to complete, sir. We had talked a couple of meetings back and twice now about the path that we've closed between Parma and Fairbridge 3 subdivisions. The bridge has been removed, the drainage ditch has been cleaned by Public Works, and improvements have been made to rock it so that it prevents erosion that's been happening. There is some additional cleanup work that has to be done, so it's not quite done. However, we had talked about what the cost would be to replace the bridge, and so the cost that we have just to do the bridge and the path to the north side with current concrete, to meet our current standards, which would be a concrete sidewalk 5 foot wide, would be in the neighborhood of $27,000. To do the whole path, including the south side, would be in the neighborhood of $70,000. It's the recommendation of planning and of Public Works and of the Parks and Rec division that we all agree that this path is now redundant. It's not needed. The Greenway pathway is now there. It's in better shape with this new bridge and its new paving. It serves both those neighborhoods, and the original path was put in 1991. It was the only way for the kids to get to school at that point in time, and of course now we've had a lot of growth since then, and the Greenway serves that purpose. So we would like your direction as to removing it. We figure the removal cost, which could be done partially this year on the north side, and the remaining of it would be done next year, would be in the neighborhood of a couple $1,000 less.
So,
Yeah, let me ask a question real quick. Didn't we already have a consensus on the part of the governing body to remove that path? I mean, was that?
Oh, no, I thought they were gonna come back with cost to rebuild it.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
okay.
And then we were gonna.
All right, because but then I was mistaken because I thought that we were going to take staff's recommendation on that to remove the path. To me, it just makes, makes sense. I mean, obviously more access is good, but not for that cost.
We did ask originally for permission to remove the bridge and close the pathway while we were considering, and that we did do with the government.
And that might be what I was remembering, yeah.
And I'm sorry, but Michael's reminding me, we did send a letter out to all the owners along the pathway on both sides of the subdivision advising them that if they had any issues with the path being closed, they needed to notify us. We received absolutely nothing back from the Fairfield people in an objective mode, and we've received positive comments from the two landowners on the north side saying they would like to see the path removed. The north side, actually, that path is a 3-foot wide path and is like 5 feet from one neighbor's house and 10 feet from the other, so it's almost an imposition at this point in time for them.
Is there anybody that would like to see the path reconstructed, redone? That looks like consensus to go ahead with your plans.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Anything else, sir? Michael?
No, not this evening. I think Larry covered the item pretty well.
I do have a question about the Center Street renovation from Kane to Gardner. By the way, I'm going to echo Lee's comments. It was very well done. Very well done. It looks like the road was widened slightly during that. It was not? It seems like it was. Maybe it's because we have just more useful pavement area.
I think it's because it's been narrow for so long with the cones.
Yeah, well, maybe, but the question I had was, it almost seems wide enough where you could put a center turn lane in there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and that's something that we will look at when we do our permanent striping.
I think for those residences on either side, as well as through traffic, it would make a lot of sense to make that into a center turn lane if possible.
Yeah, if it works.
So, just my thoughts on it.
Anything else? Michael? Chief? You got anything for us? City Clerk?
Yes, sir. As you might recall, we're in the process of doing Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee appointments as well. At this point, I do need each member of the governing body to submit to the clerk's office a candidate for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. Once a candidate has been submitted from each member, we will be able to move forward with the next step in the selection process.
With regard to the selection of candidates, I know we've got new council members rolling on to the process. Would it make sense for us to, because these are going to be filled in January, I'm sure they're not going to be filled in December. Would it be possible then to notify the councilman-elect to get their thoughts on candidates? I mean, I'm just throwing it out there because anybody who's appointed or the request they're putting in now won't be seated until January. That's going to be a new council, so they won't have an opportunity to staff those positions.
I believe that would be a governing body decision, sir. The resolution outlines that it's the council members is how the appointment process is done on those advisory committees, so that would be your decision.
And we didn't have and taken into consideration when we first put that together that there was going to be a lame duck period. So
There wasn't when we did it.
Exactly, exactly. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that to the governing body, to the group here and see what they would think.
Do we each bring someone forward? I thought it was just if your person who you originally brought forward is no longer on.
In the resolution, it outlines that the process for that committee is for each of the governing bodies to submit an applicant. It can be the same applicants. If you recall in the email I sent, there were 2 applicants.
Yeah.
You could even select them for approval. Once I have an applicant from each member of the governing body, then I present the slate to the governing body as a whole, and you all decide who you want to move forward with selecting at that point. That's how that particular advisory committee works.
And that's all the advisory committees that are not statutorily required, like, for example, Planning Commission. That's not handled that way, but all the others are. Like,
I believe that all of them are handled the exact same way.
ADA is also looking for members, too, so we need to. And EcoDev.
Yeah.
So we're going to lose an economic development, 2 economic development advisory committee positions because of the election. So.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if maybe we ought to put this aside, let the new governing body members make their decisions, although I would highly recommend that the mayor reappoint Jim Dean to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, because that was my guy, and he's not up actually yet, but he needs to be reappointed.
And that's another thing too, is that we need to look at our own appointments and see, 1, if those individuals are willing to continue, and 2, whether or not we might be better served to nominate another individual if they just don't have the motivation to continue. So anyway, I think it'd be really good for us to review that probably in January. If that's, I mean, how much are we going to get done in one meeting in December anyway?
And,
I mean,
well, and I wonder if does that require action from the council? Because it is, it was established by resolution.
So the current members will serve until their successor is appointed. And so what we'll do is we will communicate to them the discussion that you all had tonight and ask them to serve until we start that process in January.
okay.
Anyone have an issue with that?
Makes sense.
Very good. Amy, anything else?
No, sir.
Laura?
No, sir.
It's very nice of you not to pat yourself on the back, but let me say well done again. Legal?
No, sir.
City administrator?
No report tonight.
Okay. We do have a executive session. Brian, 10 minutes? We're going to need about 10 minutes. I would entertain a motion to recess into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Shute, second Melton, that we recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 754319B2 to discuss matters related to attorney-client privilege, beginning at 8:03 p.m. and returning to regular session at 8:13 p.m. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstention? We stand in recess. Yeah. Well, or maybe I borrow it from her.
Oh, maybe that.
Amy, how are we on the, okay, we got everything, live stream rolling? Okay. Entertain a motion to resume regular session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Shoot, second, Melton, that we resume regular session. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstention? We are back in regular session. Would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Harrison, second, Shoot, that we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstention? We stand adjourned.